Hello, and welcome to Afternoons with ACES, sponsored by the DC and Mid-Atlantic OATUG and Creoal Consulting. My name is Kelly Fitzpatrick, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator and Public Sector Account Manager for Creoal, and I'm on the board for the DC and Mid-Atlantic OATUG. I will be moderating today's conversation, Implementing Oracle Cloud. Our originally scheduled presenter had a conflict and was unable to join us, so our presentation regarding tax will be upcoming in the future months. So today, this webinar is the fourth in our series, Afternoons with ACES. More than a webinar, the format's similar to a podcast and will be conversational in nature. All attendees are currently placed in listen-only mode and will remain that way throughout the session. There is a chat feature in the Zoom console on your screen. If at any time during the session you have a question, you can place it in the chat and use your raise your hand feature to alert me to that question. I will transmit that question to our guests at the appropriate time so they may respond. Joining me today, we have Oracle Applications Ace Lee Briggs and Thomas Simkiss from Creoal Consulting. And with that, I will hand it off to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate it. So as Kelly said, anyone that is logged on, and we have a fair amount of attendees already, which is great to see, that was expecting to speak with Andrew Bonet today regarding his firm and their tax solution. We apologize for that. Andrew had an unexpected obligation, and we will get him rescheduled, hopefully before Cloud World in Las Vegas in October, but certainly within 2022. So what we plan to discuss today is just some general topic about implementing Oracle Cloud. Lee and I actually both work together for the same company. We worked together for a long time, and we've done a lot of cloud implementations since the cloud became generally available on the ERP side in 2013. And recently, in addition to the net new implementations we've been doing, we've been called in to do some kind of rescue work for a variety of reasons. So I'd kind of like to talk to Lee about, what he's saying as far as implementations and consulting and how that's going, and some things that we recommend that we've gotten not only from our experiences, but also from our opportunities talking with other ACES and other firms about what they're seeing from change, what they recommend people change when they do these implementations, and how they can best move forward. But before I do that, as kind of a public service announcement to our ACE compatriots that may or may not have been able to get the new information regarding ACEhood status and what you need to do to maintain that. Lee was just on a very informative session. It was sponsored by Oracle. Lee, would you mind just walking through real quick what some of the new changes are that we have to do to maintain our ACE certification and those wonderful things?
Absolutely. So for I guess the non-ACE folks, just so you have an idea of what ACEs are, it's something that this podcast series is really branded around is ACEs. So ACE is a designation that is given by Oracle. It's not something you can study for. It's not something you can pay for. It is literally Oracle recognizes you as an expert in your field. Oracle recognizes you share that your expertise with the community at large. So it's not just, hey, I've implemented stuff. It is, I've shared my experience. I've shared research. We've shared new features with the community as a whole, whether it is through OATUG conferences, whether it's through local conferences, whether it's through Open World, now called Cloud World, whether it is blog posts, webinars like this, whatever it is. It's sharing that expertise. As I said, it's not something you can study for. When Tom and I worked at a prior company, we actually, we found what an ACE was, I think in 2005, 2006, and decided to go for it. And it took it took 8 years, 7 years, something crazy like that to get there. So it's also something that you don't just kind of get and say, okay, I'm done with it. Thank you very much. You still have to keep your annual contributions going. So there are 3 levels of ACE. There used to be 3 levels of ACE. There was Oracle ACE Associate, Oracle ACE, and Oracle ACE Director. ACE Directors typically had written books. They were flown around the world by Oracle to actually promote Oracle. ACE is kind of the middle level. ACE Associates, hey, you're just being awarded ACEhood, and get your presentations in, and maybe you can progress around there. That function, that naming convention has actually changed. I think it's now going to Oracle ACE Pro, and Oracle ACE Director. So I'm hoping that we still keep our same designations, or at least we're going to be ACE Pros. Otherwise, Afternoon with ACES is going to be a really, really short-lived name. But we're now changing the emphasis on the point scoring we have there. So we had to get points. If you did a webinar, you get X number of points. If you were a member of an OATUG board, you'd get points. If you're a member of a advisory committee with Oracle, you'd get points. And you had to track these points up, whether it was by presentations or board members. And that a lot of that is actually going away now. So just because Tom is a member of the education committee with the OATUG, he's the co-chair, I think, of the multinational SIG. I'm the chair of the desktop integrator SIG and report manager SIG. Doesn't from an ACE point of view, doesn't count anymore. I'm a member of the advisory board for apps and apps technology. Not sure if that even counts anymore, and that is an Oracle thing. So it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of thing plays out now. Keep getting these points. Luckily, we have a platform such as Afternoons with Aces, where we get a lot of other aces on these sessions. So we're helping to keep the profile up, keep our expertise up, keep sharing everything, while people are still in kind of a not meeting in person area. At least it gets some kind of platform out there, and obviously we'll be attending sessions like Cloud World, like the session we had in Vegas a couple months back. We'll keep doing those.
Okay. Thanks, Lee.
Welcome.
So the topic for today is implementing Oracle Cloud, and I think I'd like to start with an observation about implementations in general. So something that our prior company started to move towards, I want to say probably back in 2010. Because it was really the way most firms did it and do it still, is these solutions-driven requirements implementations. And really what that means is the consultants don't come in and do these long, verbose, and not necessarily value-add requirements documents. You kind of assume that the client wants what we call standard functionality or modern best practices, and you kind of go from there. And that actually works, and Creoal, the firm that Lee and I work for, we still do that, and we have a lot of success with it. But something that we did start to do was we did kind of incorporate user stories or use cases back into the methodology. And the reason we did that was because the client really was lacking a way to reconcile what they were getting versus what they need. And when I say need, either a perceived need or an actual need. And without some kind of mechanism to document that story, we found that our clients had a lot more questions about things that were shown or were reviewed during the implementation than we would have expected. So what I'm starting to see in some of the larger implementations is really a move back towards more traditional requirements documents. So not really in the sense of, a Word document that's 500 pages long, but at least in some kind of matrix, whether it's Excel or I've actually seen a couple of them in PowerPoint, where the users have an opportunity to dictate, what it is they need. And then we do a reconciliation between those requirements or those requests. And again, what we're calling user stories or use cases, where you identify an actor and a task. And what are they actually trying to accomplish and how it ties to the requirements. That I have found is really working quite well. So it's not the traditional old requirements document where I need to enter a journal entry. I need a journal entry manual number, but it's more along the lines of telling a story. And the story reconciles to a business need or a business case. And as I said, I'm finding that users like that and they're adopting it. And in the instances where the clients did not do that, or the consultant did not do that, the client has been unhappy or the implementation has not gone well. And we've been requested to kind of come in there and fix what the client did. And I'm going to kind of ask Lee's opinion on something in a second, but we frequently go to these implementations, and one of the first things that we do is we take a look at the work that the client did in the system. Or that the consultant did in the system. And, Lee and I kind of have a standard joke. It's more mine than it is Lee's, but most configurations, not all, but most configurations are really opinion-based. You should flip this switch rather than that switch, or you should toggle this to automatic rather than manual. And, usually when you're looking at what a customer wants, the way you do those configurations are a matter of opinion. One consultant might say it should be automatic, another consultant might say it should be manual, and they both would be right. And the joke that Lee and I always make, and again, it's more mine than Lee's, but when we're doing these implementations, I tend to think that you get 10 consultants in a room and they'll get 10 different answers. And they're all right. It's a matter of opinion. I just tend to think that my opinion is usually better than the other 9 guys more oftentimes than not. And there's no basis for that other than we have done this for a long time. But, Lee, you've done a couple different assessments for the company than I have. So you've done a couple that I haven't been on. I've done a couple that you've been on. So I'd like to kind of get, your impression of, what necessitated our involvement on those engagements and what you think we can and will do differently to make them improve over what has been done.
So the most recent one we've had is one of the one I've had is in Virginia. I'm not going to say any client names, obviously, but that was a rescue job, as Tom said, and the going down and meeting the client I think was very beneficial, because one of the comments that the client had was, we've seen our implementing team, I think 3 times. They were keeping in whether it was a COVID method or whether it was the method of the previous implement. And again, I'm not going to trash another implementer. Don't believe in it. It seems that a lot of their stuff was, okay, got that. I'll come back and show it to you. And it was, either sending something offshore or just configuring remotely, and not getting that hands-on feeling, or more seeing someone eye to eye to get something. One of the things that is, we try and find, we've found that is important, and you've really noticed it since March 2020, is you can do stuff online. Companies have stayed around after, with COVID, and they figured out, hey, we can do stuff online and see people on here, but it's not the same. You can't see, if you're certainly displaying something, you're showing a system, you can't see everyone's camera. You definitely can't see everyone's camera. So you can't say, hey, I can see this guy, this lady over here, whatever, is not getting it, especially if they have their camera on, great. Most of the time you don't have your camera on. So just having that kind of, that person didn't get it, let me go through it again. Or I'm trying to outline something really obscure about intercompany rules or whatever. Being able to whiteboard it and see someone else and no, let me go and change it and just erase on the board. That's been tough. So certainly doing something in person seems to be, it seems to be a benefit that some of these rescue jobs have said, where, okay, I can see what you're doing. You're not just a sales guy saying yes every time. It is, you actually can do this stuff. You're backing it up, and having that expertise and actually coming down to talk to me about this has been one of those tasks. Tom, have you had that kind of feedback?
I have. I definitely have, and it's interesting because you and I are obviously a slightly of a different generation than the millennials or Gen Zs or whatnot, and I see a lot of articles on LinkedIn and just general conversations that some of the workforce just does not want to quote unquote come back to work, and we did implementations for 2 years, 2.5 years almost now, 100% remote. And it can work. We did it. Other firms have done it as well, and they've been spectacularly successful at it. I think that what I'm seeing is that clients, that is, appreciate a balance, right? So, in the olden days, when you and I started, we were on these clients 5 days a week for 6 months at a time, right? We'd be in a room flipping switches or loading data, and there really was no reason to be there other than the mechanism for connecting to these instances wasn't quite as robust or reliable as it is now. I remember, I'm sure many of my audience does as well, that lovely sound connecting to AOL to get online, and then trying to connect to the environment and praying to God that JInitiator actually launched, and that you could get the environment up and running. It's a benefit of cloud, right? And I remember Larry Ellison speaking about that when he was in Philadelphia for an OUTG conference. I think back then it wasn't even Collaborate, it was just the fall conference. That was back when the Oracle User Group used to put 2 conferences on a year. And the name of his speech was "The Internet Changes Everything." And his focus was on connecting remotely and not having to go to the workplace, and being able to load applications and use all these things. And I don't remember if he called it the cloud at the time. He might have, but he certainly just said over the internet. So the industry's been trending that way, and the ability to connect remotely is great, and the ability to converse remotely and have conversations via Zoom or via Teams. And there are tools within those applications to do whiteboarding and to do collaboration. But to your point, Lee, the implementations that I'm going into and being asked for our expertise, the main failing has been a lack of communication, and a lot of that communication has been 100% remote. And I don't know if that is a lack of awareness on how to use the tools, an unwillingness to use the tools, or just an over reliance on the tools, right? So as you said, when I went to the assessment project that I did, and the one that I'm working on is in Atlanta, I got a similar message. They had a 30-person consulting team on their project, and they did a really good job. It was hard for me to find fault with a lot of things that they did, but they made some bad decisions and some bad configuration decisions that I really think resulted from not a misunderstanding of the requirement, because it was a large firm, and it was a firm that's internationally known, and they do a good job for the most time. But I would have to believe that if they had been in a room and could have followed and done a little bit quicker follow-up, some of the mistakes that were made would probably have been avoided. So yeah, I think you're making a great point. And I guess my next question for you is, if you had to look back at COVID, and you and I are working on obviously some cloud projects and some on-premise projects as well. Are you finding with this remote kind of world that is any different doing an implementation for a SaaS-based solution versus an on-prem based solution?
So, the SaaS world is the easier, COVID. This is not sounding as horrible as it does, but COVID showed how much the SaaS model works, right? I can remember when I think it was March 8th, I think it was, when it hit, when everything was locked down, literally go home, you're going to be home for a while. People struggle with, okay, I've got my SaaS model, and we can't go in for 2 weeks. What are we going to do? There's something about Zoom. Let's see if we can figure out Zoom. And everyone figured out how you could do this kind of stuff. There was always I'll just VPN, that's not a problem. We do have some clients where you have to connect with a remote desktop. So you're literally using one laptop, one machine, and that's slowing everything down. So you see that kind of thing. But people figured out that moving to a SaaS model was something you had to do, regardless of whether it was ERP, whether it was something communication like Zoom, Teams, or whatever. You had to do that kind of thing. So I think once you kind of got over, and everyone was so polite. It was a really refreshing time 2 years ago to see, hey Tom, I'm sorry, if you're talking, I think you're on mute now. Now it's got to the point of, seriously, dude, you're on mute. Seriously, get off mute. But it was get to that time. It was something we were all sharing, so we were all kind of tiptoeing around and kind of exploring together. And from the ERP side of that, whether it was cloud or on-premise, I think people were just still getting through that. Okay, we're getting through here. Certainly from a cloud point of view, it was certainly easier because I don't have to worry about a VPN. I don't have to go through, no, you don't have your JInitiate or any of that stuff. Don't have to do VPN, don't have to do any of that technical stuff because the tool is designed to do it. I think some of the, some clients where they started doing whitelisting around SaaS, quickly figured out that, I get that you have to do that, but now that means you have to do the VPN and kind of take away some of those benefits out there. But from an implementation point of view, I think the projects I've been on since that point, I think have been largely agnostic once you've got the connectivity stuff out of the way. Cloud was built for it, so it had to work, kind of thing. But I think I think it's been pretty much the same for both of them. I mean, you've had some experience, or more experience with the EBS in the last little while. So, what do you think?
It's funny. I would say the biggest difference that I found. I remember going back to. Here's a trivia question for you, Lee. Before Vision came along, what was the old environment, the demo environment called? Do you remember?
Before my time.
It's called
Global. So Tom, just so we're talking this, so at this time, were you walking to school in the snow uphill both ways?
Yeah, both ways.
All fields out here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was called Global. But I remember, the first kind of times I got into the Vision environment in, 11, right? And, going through and testing things out, and it was really, it was fully configured. But the amount of stuff that just didn't work in the Vision environment was as much of a function as the fact that the software was so new, as it was just not configured optimally. And again, because we've got so many e-biz clients still, I've actually in the e-business suite a lot lately. And the amount of stuff that they have working, the amount of functionality that Oracle's backported into the environment is really, really neat. But as far as deployment goes, almost all of our clients, they're housed either in somebody's data center or they're an OIC, right? So while some of them we still have to do VPN to get them, we're not there. We're connecting remotely. It's really kind of the same. So I have not noticed a difference in tools. I will tell you that our approach is somewhat different in that even though you've got PaaS in the cloud and you can really extend it, as you and I know, and actually Hans Colby, with whom I work on the multinational SIG, he made a comment during one of his sessions when we were to send that the idea that you really can't customize cloud anymore isn't true. And what he meant, I think what he meant by that was because you can extend and you can build forms that look just like the cloud forms, you really can do anything that you want. But my caveat to that is within reason, right? So you still are confined within the within cloud, right? You can't customize, you can extend and you can configure the hell out of it, and you can make it do anything you want. But the nice thing with EBS is, and you tend to fall back into some bad habits. Meaning, when we do our implementations, we focus on leading practices and we focus on really trying to come up with a solution that leverages as much standard functionality as possible for all the right reasons, right? Because customization is expensive, you got to maintain it, and this, that, and the other thing. But it was kind of nice. We were doing some of these assessments and we're looking at some of the rights objects that they came up with. And, we kind of drilled in like, why'd you do it this way? And, the answer was, well, it was going to be faster to just make this minor customization, whether we put a PLL in or something else on the forms, than it was to get the users to adopt the change. And, and I get it. I mean, I would tell you, we went through and we did an assessment and we looked at and it was a well done rights object. It was really built well. It was documented. They did all the right things. And it probably saved them, I don't know, 7 or 8 form clicks to do one extension than to use the standard functionality. Could you have done that in cloud? I guess, I didn't look at that closely. Is there an API for it? Is there a REST service? I don't know. But it was kind of nice to go back to, EBS, and I was like, doesn't matter, man. I put a PLL in and I put a Zoom and it just went. So that was kind of a change. That is still different, I think, between on-prem and SaaS.
So it is, but it's looking back on it with hindsight, right? So we started cloud in what, 2014, 13, whatever it was.
13.
Right.
Yeah.
When it was, you cannot customize, you cannot. It's like, oh, okay. And it was a cool time. It was like, okay, we're learning this tool. Now let's work the way that we, let's figure out a way to get whatever they're looking at without customization. But as technology moved on, we were talking with Deborah a couple of months back, a couple of shows back. If you're looking on YouTube, click on the link, subscribe, blah blah blah. But when we're talking with
subscribe, we get merch.
Yes, get merch. Yes. When we were talking through some of this stuff, it's like, okay, so we did everything with not even the best intentions with what we had available to us. But as technology moves on, like, okay, I can do that now. Great. I still like the solution I did, but you can do this now. But consequently, it's also given you the opportunity of, okay, well, you want to be able to convert this chart of accounts to another chart of accounts, and there's more detail. No, we're going to do it this way because you could configure it and do everything, and it's harder, but it's the right way to do it. It's walking that line. Just, one of the mantras Tom gave his, get 10 consultants in here, you get 10 different answers. They're all right, blah, blah, blah. One of the other ones we've always used is cloud is great. Cloud is powerful, but just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. There are some things that are best left in the tool because you get all the analytical stuff, you get all the reporting stuff. You can track it back rather than no, there's some customization to do blah 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 to do blah whatever it is. Having that full audit trail out there of I can see exactly where it is. The problem is in here. Also kind of gets you back to using standard functionality. So if it breaks, you can certainly I'm certainly happy to help you, but if it's 3 years from now, Oracle's going to support you because I'm using standard functionality. It was a cool time, almost 10 years ago, when it was like, I'm going to figure out how this is going to work and building it out there. And it's, it kind of tying back this, to this rescue job, this assessment job. It's great kind of seeing I would have done that, X number of years ago. And that's not I'm, X number of years ahead of these folks. It's, you've seen enough functionality, especially with the quick turnaround of cloud projects that you have typically in the commercial side for some of these smaller gigs, where you've done the same, you've done something so many times, like, yeah, I see what you're doing here. Not the way I would have done it, but you kind of get through those.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, nice thing about these sessions, with ACE sessions. So we hadn't seen some of the other ACEs. So even Andrew, who couldn't make it today, as we said, but Deborah and Susan, we've actually just had conversations with a couple of other ACEs that we hadn't seen in so long. And I'm kind of just diverting a little bit, but at the Oracle conference, I'll be curious if they have like an ACE get together. So at the prior Open Worlds, although I don't remember if they did one in 2019, which was the last one in San Francisco before COVID. But it was nice to get together with the ACEs and have conversations. And I am looking forward to in person. So like kind of like an impromptu poll. We got a number of folks on the webinar. I'll be curious to see how many of these folks are intending to go to Cloud World out in Las Vegas, which is the first in-person Oracle conference I think that they'll have had since Open World in 2019. But I certainly could be missing a couple that are in Europe or in APAC. But here in the States, there haven't been too many in-person events. So that's certainly going to be a change. I guess getting back to our discussion, on your side of the business, are you seeing more clients that want us to come on site? I know in my side I am. I would say that the number of requests from my clients for some on-site presence, and it kind of varies in between who it is, but obviously during COVID it was nobody. But I would say prior to COVID, when the world was quote unquote normal, the folks that wanted us to come on site for some part of the project was kind of really going down. I would say out of 10 clients, maybe 2 were requesting that you come on site, and the other 8 were saying, don't worry about it, we never want to see it. Now that we're coming out of COVID, knock wood, I would say it's closer to 60-40 are asking us if we're willing and able to come on site. I guess getting back to what you were talking about earlier, or whether it's the tools or whether it's just fatigue. And actually, to that point, interestingly enough, when we started doing webinars at the beginning of COVID, the first one we did had like 120 people. And then we were doing them every month. And then by the time we got to 18 months in, they were dropping down to like 25 people. And I don't think the topics got any less interesting because I'm a little biased there, but I think, certain people were getting Zoom fatigue or Teams fatigue. And I think that's what we're seeing in the clients with the implementations. The clients are getting fatigued of just seeing people remotely and not being able to interaction. And to your point from a few minutes ago, not being able to look in their eyes and ascertain, are you getting what's being shown? And if not, why not? So, again, my side of the business, we're saying, like I said, about 60-40. I'd be curious what you're seeing on your side of the business.
So I would say, 50-50, 60-40, wanting you on site. I think that works. But I'll also say that from the implementations we've had going on, I think everyone who's gone to a live system is on a live system, but you certainly have an idea of the folks who are on site or had on-site presence are just that little bit further ahead of where of the folks who maybe didn't go in there. Because one of the things we've had on our gigs, you do a conference room pilot session, or you do user acceptance session, or what we call process familiarization training, right? We get some, but when a gig kicks off, you actually get everyone in a room, or the accounts payable team in a room, and it's like, okay, we're going to spend the next 6 hours building up your muscle memory of, let's go into a demo instance and let's put in, a supplier and put an invoice and pay it, that kind of thing. And it was always great to be up the front and kind of driving and showing everyone. But you always had everyone on their system. Back in the day, we actually had people doing it themselves. So you'd have someone doing crowd control at the back room to see everyone doing it, that kind of thing. Those people who were getting engaged at that point seem to get a lot further than the folks who are like, nah, I'm going to follow it online, because you're going to have the same thing that's happening on those sessions. This is probably happening now. Some of our attendees are listening, hopefully. But, I just see that email. I'm going to keep listening. I'm going to do that email of, I've got to approve this document. It's just having that other stuff there. But if you have, it's not so much Big Brother behind you, kind of, checking on, just saying, hey, I noticed you're a couple of screens behind. Can I help you out with that? Those folks tend to pick the system up more because you're almost forcing them to. I think, we've got some clients, some of our larger clients, we are having, people on site, having consultants on site, but the client isn't on site. It's, that part is kind of a tricky one to kind of deal with. Okay, so just so we're cool, you're paying for my expenses to be here, where I could be at home, not charging you expenses, doing exactly the same thing. I've got to say, the more and more you look at it, the things where you need to have discussions about stuff, in my mind, they have to be on site. You've got to come up with a really good reason for not being in person. If they've got a client in San Diego, no, I'm going out there every week just because it's San Diego and it's beautiful. If it's in North Dakota, you know what, maybe not so much. But for those ones where, let me show you the system, let's get these requirements, let's talk about your eliminations or how you're going to do roll-ups or what your inventory structure looks like. Those ones, you have to be able to sit there and go through this stuff to make sure people get it. Same with conference room pilots, same with user acceptance tests. You don't need to sit next to me or have me on site while I'm entering a bunch of values in a value set. That gets nothing. You get no benefit from that. But the stuff where it is, let's put in a transaction. No, let's do it again. That wasn't what you were expecting, because that's what you know. Okay, let's go and build that kind of stuff. It has to be in person.
Yeah. To our guest in North Dakota, by the way, that put a mean emoji. Sorry about that. There's no. It's just.
I love North Dakota. Any place that gets 100 and minus 100 in the same year, it's awesome with me, as long as I don't have to deal with. Yeah, yes. Pretty much.
Yeah. So we had talked with Mohan on the first Afternoons with Aces session. So Mohan, a year, longtime collaborator, longtime friend, about chart accounts design, and if you had done things differently in cloud, or if you do things differently in cloud than you would have or did do in EBS. And, I had said I definitely do, most because, again, there's partners out there that do chart accounts design, and they do chart accounts changes. So there's tools that they can utilize within EBS that if you need to change your chart accounts, they can do that, whereas that is not available on cloud. So, when you're doing an implementation, what considerations do you take into account when you're doing, whether it's chart or ledger design or core structures, that you may have done differently in an on-prem world because you had a little bit more flexibility?
Right. So you often have discussion around, do I need this field? Right. So, we know the two field, the two, let's stick with chart of accounts because it's the easy one, right? There are two required segments, right? You have to have balancing, you have to have natural account. And people are going to be, no, cost center. Yeah, Oracle's actually changed documentation for cost center where, it's not required now, but, if you're doing HR, then you probably, if you ever think of doing HR, you probably want to have it out there. We've had, where you're going through those kind of discussions for, I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe I've got a segment, maybe I really want a segment with project number on there. I want a segment with employee number on there. Don't do employee number. I really want a segment with my vendor on there. Great. Okay. Let's talk this through. Either the client's not going to listen to us and the client wants to take their own opinion and go with that. Absolutely great. Or no, I don't think I need that segment. No, you really, it would make sense of you to do it. I've always been an opinion of, I'm going to give you more. And the first go round, so we've taken the requirements, going away and build it. For Conference Pilot 1, I'm going to include the stuff that you didn't want in there because I want you to see how it works. An intercompany segment. It's one of the founding things that we've always gone through. Even if you're one company, put the intercompany segment on there, because as soon as you go to 2, it makes your life easier. Especially if you go to 6 or 7, it makes your life so much easier to see that other side of that. I'm going to put it in there, and if you can come up with, we've gone through Conference Room Pilot 1, and you can't come up with any scenario. Okay, maybe I won't do it for CRP2, but I probably will. It's the one that you really kind of say, never going to use it. That's stupid. Why would you put customer in there? You get why you don't put customer. Why would you put employee in there, especially when it's not just a random number? It is literally the name Bob out there. Kind of dumb, right? You can see Bob's salary. One of the things for the folks who've been listening on these sessions, Bob gets mentioned a lot. I love Bob. Bob is our example for every part of reporting. But you've really got to kind of show the folk, walk folks through, you shouldn't have out there, and here's why. The stuff that we try to include the client wants, that is a more of a tricky one. So I always include it out there, even to the point of I'll set up 2 ledgers. So, okay, we're going to do our CRP in this ledger with this extra segment. I'm still going to create a copy of that ledger without that segment in there, just so I can kind of show the difference out there. Maybe if I'm doing GL conversions, I'll create an exact copy of that ledger elsewhere, just so I can just throw all my GL conversions in there and not worry about someone putting an AP invoice back 3 years ago and messing up all our numbers. Just do something like that. So that kind of get you,
Yeah,
that kind of makes sense.
Yep. So I guess one of the other topics we hit this with, I want to say we hit with Mohan as well, but it could have been with Deborah. It's about documentation. So that I would say is a big difference in cloud to EBS. I find the documentation in cloud is a lot better. I mean, a lot better. And maybe Oracle's just gotten better at doing it, but the ability to do reporting in cloud is pretty robust, right? So again, when we're doing our projects, we kind of give the homework to the client to start running standard reports and looking what's out there before they determine how many custom reports they need or how many custom objects.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really pleased at what Oracle's done from a reporting standpoint and from a documentation standpoint, to let people know what's out there and how to run the reports and what's on there. So, when you're doing these projects, and again, we're trying to talk about implementing cloud, whether you're an end user or whether you're a customer, or whether you're a consultant, I would really recommend that you take a look at the standard documentation on what's available from an OTBI standpoint, from a BI publisher standpoint, from a financial reporting studio or SmartView. Look at what those tools are and look at what's out there, because we went from including a huge bucket of reports in our implementations for eBiz, just because the reports in eBiz, were what they are or were what they were. And even though they're a little bit better than they were because you can use BI publisher, they're still somewhat rudimentary. And I don't pick on eBiz for that. I would say to people that Oracle's trying to meet, 80% of the public's needs. So while the reports are ugly, they have everything you're looking for. Within cloud, you've got so many different options and a lot of stuff's pre-built. And to your point from a few minutes ago, as soon as people extract stuff, put it in Excel, it's dead. And you're not really getting the benefits of the cloud, right? So you really want to make sure that you use that documentation and you use the tools that are available to you. The Oracle Cloud Customer Connect is a great tool. YouTube is a great tool. So in addition to finding these wonderful afternoon with ACES sessions on YouTube on our Creoal channel, again, hit the subscribe and like button if you want. There's actually a lot of good information out there by a number of partners about how to do certain things within the Oracle applications. So a lot more information out there for users than there used to be. And really, I kind of urge you to take advantage of it.
So it's interesting you kind of jump on that, so right. So we've talked about in this session about, hey, on-site or off-site, and let's face it, it was moving off-site was probably originally more of a budget decision, right?
Yep.
I'm going to throw a ton of money at the implementation. I can throw a ton of money at the implementation, or I can throw a little less, a lot more, the same amount of money at the implementation because you don't have to be out there on time. One of the things we've always looked at from an implementation, and it's getting involved in the sales cycle. It's always, no, be more aggressive, be more aggressive, be more aggressive. It's like, well, you need the module, so I can't cut anything out there. Data conversion, maybe you can help us out on data conversion. That's great. But one of the neat ones is it's standard functionality for reporting. The tools we have on the ERP side, FRS. Okay, so the tool is the same. The chart of accounts is going to be slightly different, but the tool is the same. SmartView, the tool is the same. Your chart of accounts is different, but that functionality works. OTBI, get in the demo instance. You build something in the demo instance, guess what? You can actually just archive it out and dump it straight in your cloud instance. It's going to work. It's the cool thing about everyone being on the same level. It's software as a service. It's completely up to date, or at worst, you're going to be one patch set behind what you're looking at. And BI Publisher, I don't want to say it got left behind on implementations, but it's a tool that that is relatively easy to pick up. And this is saying it as the smart the smart Alec who figured it out in, I don't know, 2007, because it had just come out. Maybe it was earlier than that, 2005 maybe. Okay, I'm going to figure out what to do because this report is ugly as heck. And it's always accounting reports, right? It's always, oh no, it looks so pretty in PDF. Yeah, it looks great. Can I have that in Excel? It's like, yeah, but just so you're aware, you're getting that in Excel. So you're going to have a table with the beginning balance, and then you're going to have a table underneath with the activity and closing balance. It's going to be a repeat, and you can't do anything with it. And it's always accounting folks that hate that, that love the report, hate how it looks. Okay, build that out. But that's something that, okay, you want to take ownership of this? Great, go own it. I'll show you how to use the report. Because if a dumb functional person can do it, then your techie folks who actually know this stuff can actually do that kind of thing. Obviously you need someone who has an eye for that kind of stuff. It's not going to be, yeah, here's a table and a bar chart. It needs to be look pretty. Right. But once, if you have the tools to make it look pretty, then you can do it.
Yep, I agree with you. So with that, I think we're going to talk about our, upcoming afternoons with ACES sessions. So Kelly, we have a guest lined up for September, do we not? She's like my producer. She's like Robin Quivers.
We are working on the guests for September, but we're hopeful that it'll be Andrew Bonet filling in on his taxes, because everyone was excited to hear about taxes. So I'm reaching out to him, working on making sure that that works for his schedule. We did have one quick question though, and somebody's wondering if you had just like one piece of advice you could give to an EBS customer who is considering moving to the cloud. What would that be, or where would they even start to begin to consider the move to the cloud?
Well, that's a great question. It really depends on your footprint. So what I mean by that is there's a lot of functionality that has moved from EBS into cloud. And I really believe for the most part, it's better. On the financial side, there's nothing in cloud that I don't like better than I did in EBS. On the SCM side, there's still a few things that I prefer on the OM side in EBS than I do to cloud, but the product's really great. But you really want to make sure that the core modules that you need are there. When we started our cloud journey as a company, Oracle and Creoal really pitched, there's a couple of different ways you can go to cloud. You can do, Big Bang, and they called it an outside-in approach. Inside out. We start with core ERP and you go to cloud and you kind of move it out. And then they had an inside-out approach, outside-in approach, where you start with an edge product, whether it's EPM or whether it's HCM or just standalone procurement. Another approach that we saw, and we actually saw a lot of companies employ this quite effectively, was when they were getting a new division, a new business unit, rather than putting them on eBiz, they would put them on cloud, kind of as like a pilot or proof of concept. And that worked the same way, it worked really well. So I guess my answer, Kelly, would be make sure that the functionality that you're looking for, the key functionality, is in cloud before you move forward with an evaluation. Blocking, tackling, financials, as I said, and supply chain, that's there. But if you're running, lease management, or if you're running loans, or if you're running treasury, those modules don't exist in cloud. And so if you're okay using the cloud solution from Oracle and then using another solution as almost like a best of breed approach, then there's certainly some considerations there. That would be kind of my recommendation. Lee, you have something to say on that?
I think it's the same thing. You know, when Oracle built cloud, they took the best of what they had and built it from the ground up, right? So from the ERP side, from financials point of view, what do you say? 90% is EBS. If it does it in EBS, it's probably there in cloud. GL balance is a whole different thing, but don't get me wrong. And I love FSG reports. They're so near and dear to my heart and report manager. Yeah, cloud is so much better. It gives you much more functionality out there. So it's, what do you use? If it's pure financials, cloud's going to get you there most of the way. If it's supply chain, if it's HCM, you're going to need to explore what those are. And this is, I'm the dumb finance guy. I know debit and a credit, total debits and credits probably need to add up to the same thing. HR is people and jobs. We're good with that. And we said the same thing with Deborah when she was on the session. Yep. SEM is just the widgets and making widgets and selling widgets, whatever. You've got to explore those areas out there. The other thing to bear in mind is, okay, assuming you're going to cloud or you're moving over there, start your documentation early. And that sounds so dull, right? What do you mean documentation? What do I need for the system to work? Going back to Tom's original point, right? We used to do these requirements documents, which were, I need the ability to enter a supplier. I need the ability to enter an invoice. Yeah, we're not talking about that kind of stuff. It's a given you need to enter an invoice. But what kind of invoices make sense for you? I need to enter an invoice that matches to a PO with no receipt. I need an invoice that matches to a PO with a receipt. I need a 1099 invoice. I need an invoice where I'm not having any coding because it should be going to Bob for approval. Or if it's under this, it should be Sally. All those are user stories. You need to get down there. You need to get documented. So when you are building the system out, and certainly when you're going through conference room pilot, yeah, you saw that you had these, these requirements out there. This is how I'm doing it. One of the great things that we've found working with public sector, in a commercial world, it was always, I want Oracle, I want Oracle Cloud, and it needs to do this, and that was the extent of it. And you go through the sales process and you get there. But when you're dealing with public sector or some of these larger companies where it's like, no, I'm going to put out an RFP or a requirements document out there, and this is what it has to do. It's great to actually go through those because you get a spreadsheet of like 4,000 requirements, which is great as an implementer because you say, thank you for these 4,000 requirements. Hey, Oracle, can you take care of 4,000 requirements? But you've got something you're tying back to. Oracle says it can do it, then you've got to be able to demonstrate that you can do all that. And some of it's going to be, the standard, as Tom would say, or the Americans on the call would say, standard blocking and tackling. It's, I can dump and report out to Excel. Yeah, I can do that. Click, look, I do that everywhere. But when you start getting into those, yes, I've got to be able to enter an invoice and match it to a PO, and it's got to be a 1099 vendor. You can very quickly go through conference room pilots and show one thing and meet 60 or 70 requirements. You just shown it in one fell swoop. So that documentation, those use cases are going to keep keep your project going. It's going to really hold your implementer accountable for stuff because you've said this is what you want the system to do. Now your implementer is going to hold you to that and saying, when you come back in 8 months and say, what about doing Bob or whatever? It's like, it doesn't say it in your requirements. Yeah, poor Bob. Anyway, where's that requirement? You never gave it to us as a requirement. We went through conference room pilot 1, conference room pilot 2, conference pilot 3, user acceptance testing. Nothing came up out of Bob. I'm going to see what I can do, but it is what it is. Okay. So documentation. Don't know who answered that question. It's an awesome question, but yeah, documentation.
Say James Joyce type answer, a little rambling there. So Kelly,
like
is our producer. I expect you to get up on the bookings. Everybody joined in. We appreciate it. You can certainly follow us on YouTube, as I said. We will be having a session next month. It is typically speaking always around the middle or the last second to last Thursday of the month. Lee Lee will not be. I will be in Cloud World. Looking forward to seeing a couple of folks that did raise their hands, say that they were going. So I look forward to seeing some of you folks out there. With that, I'll turn it back over to Kelly and talk to you guys next month.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody. It's always the third Thursday. What a
I didn't know where this 2 weekends from 2 weeks from the end of the month came up with it. It's always third. Come on.
Yeah, you're confusing me there. The third Thursday of every month is our Oracle Afternoons with Aces, with our Creoal Aces, Tom Simkiss and Lee Briggs. And usually we'll have a special guest ace to join us for the conversation as well. So look forward to seeing you all in September. And hopefully it'll be Andrew Bonnet discussing taxes, but that remains to be seen. And I will update everybody as soon as I am aware of it. A recording of this webinar will be made available later today, sent to all attendees and posted on our company website and our YouTube page. And a link will be out on our LinkedIn. And I think that's all I have for today. So thank you so much for joining us, Lee and Tom. And thank you for all of our attendees. And I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.